to further its inscrutable aims. Between her attacks on me with the wash rag and her preparations of the weak tea, toast, and chicken broth that constituted my sustenance during this period, Mrs. Burr was driven by her insatiable curiosity to poke around the apartment like a common burglar. In the bedroom, she operated under the guise of her merciful profession. "Gotta get some pajamas on you," she would say, and, deaf to my instructions, would proceed to ransack every drawer in the bureau. Once beyond sight, however, she pretended no vestige of decency, and from my bed I could hear her assault, one by one, the various enclosures throughout the other rooms, desks, cabinets, and chests, many of them quite valuable examples of Spanish colonial craftsmanship, which I procured during my years in northern New Mexico, where I'd gone to strengthen my weak lungs on high-altitude air. It was when I heard her slide back one of the glass doors of the case containing my beloved collection of Indian relics that I was forced to protest. Even if the vibration of a shout did make my poor nose throb in pain. "Mrs. Burr, I must insist that you let my Indian things alone," cried I. She shortly appeared in the door of the bedroom, wearing a magnificent Sioux headdress, reputedly the war bonnet of the great crazy horse himself, for which I paid a dealer $650 some years ago. I was too agitated at the moment to appreciate the sheer visual ludicrousness of this fat woman under that splendid crest. I was too shocked by her heresy. Among the Indians, eagle feathers belonged exclusively to the braves, and a squaw would no more wear a war bonnet, even in jest, than a modern woman would climb into her husband's athletic supporter. Readers will pardon the uncouth comparison, yet it is not unjustified, for there are few lengths to which our women will not go. The pun is intended. And what Mrs. Burr was actually doing, albeit unwittingly, was to dramatize the malaise of our white culture. She whooped and performed a crude war dance in the doorway. That person's energy was astonishing. I dared not protest further, for fear she might take offense and damage the rare headdress, which was almost a century old. Already some of the eagle down had been shaken loose and floated about like the seed-carrying parachutes of that woodland plant that bursts to perpetuate its race. By remaining silent and averting my eyes, I discovered the way to survive Mrs. Burr's bad taste. Failing to elicit another sound from me, she at last replaced Crazy Horse's bonnet in the cabinet and came back to the bedroom in what, with her, passed as a reflective mood. She seated herself heavily on the radiator cover. "Did I ever tell you when I worked on the staff of the old folks' home in Marville?" A more sensitive person would have taken my murmur as adequate discouragement, but Mrs. Burr was immune to subtlety. "Seeing them Indian things recalls that to my mind." She cleared her throat with a disagreeable sound. "There was a dirty old man there, claimed to be 104 years old. I will say he looked every bit of it, I'll say that for him, nasty old customer, scrawny as a bird, and with skin like worn-out oilcloth. He couldn't have been less than 90, even if the other was a dirty lie." In trying to reproduce Mrs. Burr's speech, I know I am quixotic. The best I can do is to describe it as the vocalization of maximum ill will. "Anyways, the other thing he claimed to be was a cowboy and Indian fighter from the olden time. They watch a lot of television up there, old westerns and such, and he was always saying that's junk because he went through the real thing. Rotten old bum. Used to just ruin it for them other old folk, if they paid him any mind, which they didn't usually. He had wandering hands, I always used to say, the old devil, and you couldn't come and tuck the blanket around his ancient legs in the wheelchair without he'd try to get one of them little birdie claws down into your bosom. Say, he had a pinch, too, if you bent over nearby to get a pillow off the floor. Imagine, with a woman of my age.